Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Shubat. I am your host, and this is episode 12, where we will be talking about the new release and true story, The Outrun. I'm very pleased to once again invite back my wonderful co-host, the co-host with the most from Virginia, the wonderful, wonderful state in the United States. Mason, welcome.
Daniel, great to be back. Thank you. I'm not sure what I have the most of, but maybe we'll find out together.
The most wrong movie opinions is...
there we go. Okay. Well, the first volley fired. We'll see how the French-American War ends. French-Canadian-American War ends.
Oh, well, you're already wrong there. I'm not French-Canadian.
Doesn't matter. You're all the same. Mason is racist against Canadians for some reason, yes.
Well, yeah, all French Canadians have now tuned out. So for that minus one listener, goodbye.
Quebec just has one listener. It's one podcast.
Yes, exactly. Mason, how's it been going? I've missed chatting with you, but I'm very excited to be talking about another movie once again. But how's life? You okay?
It's been going horribly. I haven't talked with you about movies in so long. I've done nothing but exist and live my life. Do you know how dull that is? No, I am so happy to be back on the show with you to talk to the wonderful movie world and, of course, specifically the French Canadians. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good as well. I've been traveling a bit and working my butt off, but it's always nice to kind of just de-stress and talk about a film that this one, I don't think we will get into as many arguments as we did on the last one. For people who haven't listened to our last episode, it was the most contentious one yet. We talked about Trap. Mason was wrong. We'll just leave it at that. And
I am not wrong.
And today we're going to be talking about The Outrun, which is what many people view as a dark horse for Best Actress for Saoirse Ronan. I was quite excited to watch this, and I know that it has some different reviews on it, but I was still looking forward to it. And considering I'd read the book and am a big fan of Amy Liptrot's work, I was definitely going into it with an open eye. But before we do get into that, Mason, I did want to ask you, as I always do, is there anything you've been watching, I guess now over the last month, that you'd like people to know about and maybe go check out? Is there anything that springs to mind, good sir?
Sure, I'll give you a twofer. TV-wise, I have been catching up, and this show came out years ago, so some people will definitely roll their eyes. But I've been catching up on Beef, which is a Netflix show starring Stephen Yeun and Ali Wong. Just absolutely fantastic show on so many levels. I won't say too much about it here in terms of story, just in order not to spoil it, but it basically deals with how hurt people, and it's just done in such a fantastic way. The performances are wonderful, the story is excellent, and it's funny too. Like, it deals with really serious things, and you're laughing a lot of the time. So very, very well done show. Movie-wise, I have been checking out a lot of old-timey flicks. Most recently old-timey might be overselling here, but I just recently watched Schindler's List, which Rosh Hashanah was just recent, so I wanted to make sure that we got some Jewish love in the recent movie watch catalog from Mason. I mean, this movie isn't incredibly old, but it is a timeless classic showcasing just horrible reality of the Jewish plight back in the Holocaust and one man's goal starting off selfishly and then eventually turning into something more wholesome to work with and then eventually save generations of Jewish families, which is just stunning in so many ways. So that's my list. How about you?
Well, I know that was a movie that we talked a little bit about when we reviewed One Life back in March, and I don't know how I'm possibly saying this, but sadly it's a timely reminder of just the horribleness of anti-Semitism, and I know it's just a really powerful film, so I do implore people to watch that, especially in this day and age, so we never forget, obviously. I think you've kind of put me at a weird place here, because my movies can't really top that, but because
what was that at the beginning of the show? How you were saying I was always wrong, and then I pull out these amazing picks. Yeah, let's see what you've got.
Yes,
pull out your catalog,
Mason. I will give you this one. Your film is better than my film choice, but
huzzah!
I still think that the listeners will appreciate both our recommendations. My recommendation is I've been on a bit of a Saoirse Ronan binge, so I'm just going to recommend one film, and that was Brooklyn. I think it is one of the most whimsical and just beautiful love stories out there. I am not a love story guy usually. Maybe I've become more romantic in my old age. I'm lying. I was romantic when I was young too. I was just a little more cynical. I think Brooklyn is just a phenomenal story. I don't think it was my first introduction to Saoirse Ronan because she was in Atonement as well, and she was wonderful in that. But I think this was her real first starring vehicle, or the movie that I really thought showed her to the rest of the world. And I thought she was just amazing in it. It's an immigrant story coming to America, North America, and it's something that I can really relate to. And I really ask that people go check out that movie as well as Schindler's List. And Beef is something that's on my list, so I might have to bump it up a few spots.
I would just highly recommend is all I'm saying. And like in terms of Saoirse Ronan, like, yeah, she absolutely knocks out every role that she does. I think the first thing I saw her in was Grand Budapest, where very small role, but she did a wonderful job. She was absolutely lovely. And she just never stopped. She just kept hitting role after role with pinpoint accuracy. So glad to see you're looking through some of her backlog.
Well, yeah, and her husband are probably, I think, the best Hollywood duo in terms of acting. Jack Lowden, who's just fantastic in Slow Horses as well. So that'll be my TV recommendation on this film podcast. That'll be my TV
you asked for what I was watching. You didn't say film. You said what I was watching. I could have said Horses in the Meadow, and that would have worked.
You're right. So
gotta be specific, Daniel.
That's my TV recommendation. So without further ado, Mason, I'm going to ask you before I get into my opinion on the movie. I guess I should tell people a little bit about this film. It's about a woman's journey. It's a true story about the author who also helped co-write the screenplay, Amy Liptrot, and it's her true story about her life growing up with an evangelical Christian mother and a bipolar father, and dealing with that through alcoholism later in her life, and having to sort of overcome that and find a way through that. And it's a really haunting story, but it ends up being a really beautiful one as well. So I guess, Mason, let me hear some of your initial thoughts on this film.
Sure. This is not a bombastic blockbuster of a film. This is very much an introspective, ethereal piece that really needs you to take stock of not just what's happening on screen, but like how you feel about what it is. It's not something that you can just be wowed out by the visual and the acting and the everything else. Not to say that any of that is bad. It's not, but it is not a loud in your face film that is going to be screaming its message at you. It's like, this isn't just saying like alcoholism bad, even though obviously it is. This is more saying like, this is what you experience, not just by going through alcoholism, but by doing all of this through being with your family, being away from your family, isolating yourself from the entire world, and dealing with your demons in your own way, whatever works for you. And sometimes there are healthy ways of doing that. So there's very much the opposite way of doing that as well. And both sides are kind of shown here. The entire time I was watching this, I was really just thinking, like, what would I do in that scenario? Like, how would I react? Like, if I was dealing with something so devastating, not just to me, but to those around me. And it really just makes you think. And you, as you're watching Saoirse Ronan, who plays Rona in this movie, go through it herself, it is never once do you think like, oh, she's acting, or like, oh, like this is a fictional or realistic fictional tale. Every bit of this is completely 100% legitimate and easy to bite into in terms of believability. I think that this isn't something that you'll like enjoy watching exactly. Not to say it's a bad movie, just to say it is something you have to endure because you can so easily see this happening, if not to you, then someone that you know, and then coming to terms with, okay, this is the reality of their situation, and they're not just going to be able to say, I'm going to move on and lose this addiction or improve my life or whatever. This is something that they have to physically like dig themselves out of, and that is not always a pretty sight. So I think this film was extremely honest. I think it was very well done in terms of casting and cinematography. I think that it is not something I would probably watch again.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a line towards the end of the movie, and it's another alcoholic, like a recovering alcoholic, talking to Saoirse Ronan's character, and he says that you don't get over alcoholism. Like, it's not something you ever get rid of. It's something that you learn to deal with, and it's something that, you know, as time goes on, it becomes a little easier each day to deal with. And I think, you know, it's weird, but this came up in my head while I was watching the film, and it felt very similar to Uncut Gems in the way it made me feel. Obviously not as anxiety filled as Uncut Gems did, but it was similar, where it just made me feel this profound sadness. Instead of profound anxiety, it made me feel profound sadness the entire film. And it was hard to get into at the start. I think the start was a little, you didn't really know where the film was at times. It was a little bit messy at times. But as I got into it, and as the film progressed more, I started understanding the characters and understanding what was going on, and understanding the time jumps, because this is a very non-linear film.
Right.
And
is that what you mean by messy, the time jumps? Because I found that very difficult to follow as well.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think it was a deliberate choice, because it was sort of showing us that this journey through with alcoholism it's not an easy one, and it's not one that just kind of, you know, gets better and better. It goes from really good to really bad. And as someone who personally has had those times in his life, specifically in his teenage years, where, you know, there were lots of highs and lows, and that's sort of how hormones work. I think it's very much the same with addictions as well. You can feel like you're making a lot of strides, and then something happens, and you're back at square one. And I think this movie really encapsulated that very well. I thought Saoirse Ronan was just fantastic. As per usual, I agree with you. I don't think she has many roles where she doesn't hit it out of the park. I also love Stephen Delane, who played her father, who was bipolar.
Who continues his trek of being a terrible dad in his movies / TV shows. Yeah.
Yeah. He does it well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, but King Stannis burning his daughter, and now this guy just having complete breakdowns. Yeah,
and probably contributing in a few ways to Rona, Saoirse, to Saoirse Ronan's character, to Rona, and her struggle with alcoholism.
Yeah, but the cast very well complements her, right? I always felt like every piece was integral, no matter how large or light. Like with her mom, with Annie, or with her dad, I think his name was Andrew. But they never felt like, of course we have to have parent issues to make it a recovery film. No, they had character arcs, they had growth, they had their own failings that I thought really brought a lot of context to Rona as a character. I thought that was very well done.
Well, and you could really see, I really love the relationship between Rona and her mother, because it was obviously a very flawed one, and it was one of the points of contention between Rona and her mother, is that her mother was a born-again Christian, and became that after her father was institutionalized because of his bipolar disorder, and how that helped her deal with it. And it just shows that there's so many different ways to deal with tragedy in life. And, you know, there were certain things that her mother did that just weren't okay and were crossing boundaries. But then you could also see there were certain things that Rona did that definitely crossed boundaries. And
oh yeah.
And it was this sort of friction that towards the end of the movie, we get to see. I wouldn't say it solves everything, but you could see that there was this closeness, and that there was this understanding that it didn't matter what happened, they would always love each other. And seeing that kind of unconditional love between a mother and her daughter so wonderfully portrayed on the screen was quite, I don't know how you would say it. It was quite eminent to me, and it was quite evident as well. and it was really beautifully portrayed by the two actresses. I think it was.
It did feel very realistic, just with
Yeah.
like it wasn't perfect. They didn't not have issues with each other in the way that they led their lives respectively, but their family, their mother and daughter, they are going to find a way, or at least try to find a way, to get over whatever barriers they've put between each other. Yeah, and I think that as far as where they got in terms of like, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm at least willing to try, that felt pretty real.
Well, yeah, and it's such a prominent problem today. I think I've seen it even in my life, where people aren't willing to forgive each other for stuff that, you know, especially when you're family, it should be easier, but it isn't for some reason. And I think that that really spoke to me, and that was one of my favorite parts of the film was the relationships, because like you said, there were no characters just thrown in.
Right.
These characters all had a part to play, and I think the actors that played these characters all did a brilliant job.
Let me tell you something that spoke to me. Outside of the excellent story and performances, I think that something that really just resonated with me was the fact that Rona basically exiled herself to this island of an island off of the coast of Scotland, I think, and is very much in Timbuktu. Like, they have there's no like emergency services there. There's barely a grocery store, barely people. I think like under 50 people were probably on that island, but going there to isolate herself and deal with her own issues while working on a cause that she was passionate about was, to me, that almost feels like a dream, where like you want to sail around the world by yourself, or like just be in a cabin alone and like write your manuscript or something like that. And I'll tell you what, this really spoke to me. The absolute capturing of that locale, of that island, just sticks in my mind. It is gorgeous, like a Bob Ross painting of a rocky cliffside, like being battered by these massive swells of water that are not going to take no for an answer. It is nature at its in its most violent form, and it's got this strange beauty to it. This like absolutely destructive power, but that obviously so dangerous. And I think that kind of relates to Rona's journey here of like, obviously she's trying to like put her life together, and it's a beautiful thing, her putting the pieces back one by one, but it is also a very rough and rugged process that she has to push and pull through. I just thought that was a really good kind of mirroring of theme to locale. Absolutely gorgeous location, though.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because I think that island and that the last act of the film was one of my favorites. We talk a little bit about when she started, I guess, her job, where she was looking for corn crakes, which were these rare and maybe close to extinct birds that made these very distinct sounds. And it was sort of like a zipper. It was like, and it was just a very distinct sound. And it came up in the film quite a bit, and it tied it together really nicely as well. But I won't spoil that for anyone. But I think that once we get to that island and we sort of, even the relationships she has with the locals, she meets a nice boy there. She meets a shopkeeper who turns out to be a recovering alcoholic, and just the little nuances of those relationships, it really spoke to me. But like you said, the island really was a character in itself, and it is something that a lot of people, including myself, think about. About just kind of leaving and going kind of non-contact and just working on themselves. And I think what this movie can confirm, and this is on a lighter note, is that cold plunges can help anyone. Because in the film, she did go into the icy water, and she did come out smiling and laughing and was dancing all over the place. I'm not saying this is a healer. I'm just saying it is proved time and time again, and you see it in film as well now, that going into some cold water will always make you feel better.
Joe Rogan has much to answer for. I don't don't know. I feel like at most it's like gallows humor where she nearly froze to death and was like, oh god, I nearly died. Haha. I get that a little bit, but I don't know if I'd say it's a healer. There.
Well,
there's our patented disagreement for the podcast, Daniel.
Yes, hey, if that's the only disagreement we have, that's okay. But hey, if you ever come up here in the winter to Canada, I will take you cold plunging in the river near my house, and you will understand finally what I'm talking about. I promise you.
Or I will be dead, and that'll be on you.
I won't let you die, I promise. Your wife would be very, very angry at me.
And my spirit would never let you go. Anyway, but, I like what you said about like the island being a character itself, though. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's a good reflection of Rona herself. Honestly, that was my favorite part, was the showcasing of, I think it's Orkney, the Orkney Islands, that have this kind of cool mythology behind them, as Rona describes throughout the film. That was definitely my personal favorite part. I think that this film has a lot to say. I think it could have said it a little bit more clearly, but it is challenging us, the viewer, to kind of come to conclusions ourselves. And that is for some people. It's not for everybody. This movie is not being sold as like a massive wide release, and I can see why. It's definitely for a very like particular kind of viewer. That being said, I think this does definitely have its audience, and I think that there's a lot of success to be found in just the retelling of this very personal story. So, I mean, I approve of it. Like, I think that this was a worthwhile film to see.
Would you rank this as a VOD watch, or as a theater watch? Or
this would definitely be a VOD. This would be one that, like, you sit at home and you kind of like the character, like, watch it alone, watch it by yourself, and think, how would I do in this situation? What would I go to? What lengths would I go to fix what I had broken? Or like, who would help me, or who would I go to for support? Who would be affected by my troubles this way? That, I think, is the real appeal of this film, in my personal opinion. What about you? Well, theater, VOD, or skip?
So one thing I will say before I mention my rating is that Nora Fingscheit, who is the director, is not someone who I've heard of before, but is someone that I do look forward to now watching either one of her older movies or something she does next, because I did appreciate this film. It took me a while to get into it, but once I did, I was hooked. It's a weird rating for me, because this is a movie that I do think you should be able to reflect on. And as sad as this is to say, I don't think you can reflect on a movie anymore in theaters, because I think too many people have a short attention span, and too many people will turn on their phones or talk too loudly or do whatever they can to not watch the film. So I think this is definitely an introspective one. And if you can find a theater where, you know, it's only cinephiles and you know you're not going to have a problem with distractions and things like that, then I'd say please go to that theater. And I think this is more of an indie film, so I think it will only be playing in theaters like that. But it's right in the middle for me between a VOD release and a theater. I wouldn't put it as something that's unmissable in theaters and that you have to run to theaters right now. But I would say something that if you don't want to wait until VOD, I do think it's worth going to watch. But I definitely think you have to have the time to kind of sit with it and think about it. So I guess I'm undecided, but I will lean towards the VOD release as well.
Okay.
I think that if you can watch it in the theater with fellow film lovers, then go for it. It's well worth your time, and I think Saoirse Ronan really puts in a terrific performance, as well as the rest of the cast. I can't say enough good things about them, and I will watch on for Nora Fingscheit's future films, and it's in theaters now as of the previous Friday. So if you can find it, definitely go search it out. But otherwise, I know it's definitely one that you will be able to kind of sit with, and I guess feel is the right word, at home. So
you think this is the vehicle for Saoirse Ronan's best actress nom?
Well, so what I'm hearing right now, and this is kind of moving on a little bit, what I'm hearing right now is that there's a lot of buzz that she could be the youngest double nominee in terms of having a Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress in the same year. There's another movie coming out. I can't remember the name of the film. I know it's a war film where she's a supporting actress, and that's what they're putting her up for. And I think that out of the female performances I've seen this year, this is definitely, one of the better ones. Obviously, a lot of the Oscar films are going to be coming out in the next few months after they've done their tours at the film festivals. But so far, this is definitely the best performance I've seen. I mean, she just really got into it. And I think this was a passion project for her because her and her husband produced it as well. And I know that this was something she really threw herself into. But I thought she was wonderful and really, really good. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of that movie that Jennifer Aniston did a few years back. Similar sort of plot line as well, where I think it was called Cake, and she was getting a lot of Oscar buzz as well. This movie isn't going to be nominated for anything else. This is her starring vehicle. I think it's a really, really good film, and I did enjoy it. But I think that this could be similar to that movie Cake, where it is just kind of catapulting Saoirse Ronan there. But I know it also wasn't made for that. So if it doesn't, they'll be okay with it. But if it does, I think it'll give the film some much needed publicity, which is always a great thing.
It's weird that it oddly reminds me a bit of Hitman, where the movie was very good. I enjoyed it, but that it was primarily a vehicle for its starring lead. And I think that this is very similar in the fact, like, the movie was good. I enjoyed it. It had good talent behind it. But this really is just a showcase of Saoirse Ronan's abilities. Not that it needed any more validation. And will it get her the Oscar? I couldn't tell you. Frankly, this year for film, I have not been blown away by much. No. It's been a kind of a quieter movie year, which is okay. But if she won for this, I would almost be disappointed. Not because her performance is poor, but because it's not like this massive starring vehicle that I know would be like a classic cinema go-to for the remainder of time. Like something like Schindler's List, or something like, oh my God, I don't know, My Fair Lady, something that will just stick in the hearts and minds of people after they watch it. This will definitely stick with me, but not in a way that I kind of
want to watch
think will live forever. Yeah. And I think that with her talent, she deserves to be recognized for something more to that level. But we'll see. Much like the election, the only poll that matters is the one that is released the day of the announcements of the results. So we'll see what happens.
Exactly. And Mason, I do have good news in terms of, the underwhelming year that it has been in terms of film. Gladiator 2 comes out in less than a month. So
that movie needs to pull such weight just to have a reason to exist. Look, I'm excited for it. I'm sure it's going to be excellent. But there is no reason for that to exist other than money. And I know that that's just like movies in general right now. But God damn it, does it just make me hate the state of the industry right now.
I know, but Mason, a boat battle in the Coliseum.
That makes no fucking sense.
It does, because it happened. That's historical. Ridley Scott is being historical. You know how rare that is?
He's very, very usually historical. He's just not properly historical.
He's not properly historical, but this is properly historical. This has never been put to screen, even though it did happen. I'm not sure if the sharks were there, but beyond, I'm fine with the sharks being added. I'm scared shitless of the sharks, so I'm excited. Like,
ye old Roman aquariums, I guess we're invented.
I've been talking about this film all year. There's no way I could be let down, because I've never been let down by a Ridley Scott film before.
Never.
For the people who are listening, I winked there. But yeah. I do have high hopes.
Did you see Napoleon?
I have high hopes for the film. I saw Napoleon. We are moving past that. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our review of the Outrun. I'm really happy that Mason and I once again got to chat. We have a few movies coming before the end of the year. I know that we might be doing an end of the year list as well. bringing on some old favorites. That's something that I've been thinking about, and I know would be fun for everyone to hear. And we do have some more cool interviews coming as well. So thank you all for listening. And as always, I'm going to let Mason count us out, because he is the co-host with the most good movie opinions of this movie review.
You know what? I'll take it. That works. Well, if this review made you want to go to an island and isolate yourself from anyone ever again, then make sure to leave us a follow. Maybe click that subscribe button, leave a comment. Spotify lets you do that now. As always, we'd love to hear from you. But until next time, I've been Mason.
I've been Daniel.
And we'll see you at the movies. Bye, y'all.